First story. I heard this from a friend, and it is said that there is a film to prove it. My friend came to Canada from the Philippines to study. While in Canada, he and his mother lived in a small house. His desk was placed in the corner of the room by a window. Despite being very hard-working, shortly after moving into the house, he began to feel something tapping his neck gently whenever he sat at his desk and concentrated on studying. At first he thought it was nerves and paid it little mind. But as time went on, the sensation persisted. It occurred every time he sat at the desk and ceased as soon as he got up from it. He eventually mentioned this to his mother. She consulted a fortune teller, who suggested that many unseen things could be captured on camera. The fortune teller advised taking a photo the next time he experienced the sensation, as it might provide an explanation. Skeptical, my friend returned home and sat at the desk to read. Sure enough, the gentle tapping began again. His mother quickly took a photograph and sent it to a photo studio to be developed. When they received the photo, they were horrified. In the image, next to my friend, was a pair of feet hanging in the air. It turned out that what my friend had been feeling were the feet of a man who had hanged himself. As the man swung, his feet kept touching my friend's neck. The next story. Last year, on a rainy night, I stopped a vehicle on the national highway to go back to Chongqing. Looking back now, it was a very old and worn-out bus. The vehicle was nearly empty. There was a girl sitting in the last row of the bus. The seat next to her was also unoccupied. I approached her and asked, "May I sit here?" She smiled and nodded. She was beautiful, so beautiful that it was surprising. She was wearing a plain long skirt, a kind of man's nature, so I started chatting with her, and I talked to her about some of my past events. She listened with great concentration, and she still had some feelings when talking about the depth of love, and then her chatterbox also opened up. She said, "I'm 22 years old this year. I was very miserable when I was a child. On my 5th birthday, my father suddenly came to told me that my mother would leave us tomorrow and told me not to be sad. I was still young at that time and didn't care. When I woke up the next morning, I heard the bad news of my mother's death. I was surprised. My father could only offer me a bitter smile. A few years later, my father, my brother and I, on my 10th birthday, my father said to me with tears in his eyes at night, 'Tomorrow your brother, he is leaving us too.' In my innocence I asked, 'Where is my brother going?' My father replied, 'He's going to be with your mother.' I didn't care at that time. The following day my brother passed away in a way that cannot be explained. I felt scared and went to look for my father. My father looked at me with an indifferent look and didn't say a word. What happened next? I had a good life for a few years, but on my 15th birthday in the morning, my father had arranged everything at home and celebrated my birthday. In the evening he suddenly said to me, "Tomorrow I will be leaving you too. You should live the rest of your life well." He handed me a letter and said to me, "Open this letter on your 20th birthday and you will have the answer to everything." I was very scared. I was afraid that everything my father said would come true. My father really left me the following day. My father's body was found by the riverside. As she spoke, she choked up and she continued, "And so I lived alone." After another 3 years, a gang came into my life. I loved him very much and we lived together. Together another year passed like this, and suddenly one day the gang disappeared. I searched everywhere and couldn't find him. I was heartbroken. Finally, when I was 20 years old on the night of my birthday, I finally opened the letter my father left me. It read, "Lianair, I know you have been suffering in the past few years, but when you are 18 years old you will meet a man, but he will also leave you after a year. There's no need to look for him because you can't find him at all. Our family will be reunited tomorrow." When I heard this, I shivered all over, and I asked her again, "How old are you this year?" She told me, "I am 22 years old, and now my family is very good to me." Suddenly I broke out in a cold sweat, and then I noticed no one had come to buy a ticket yet. I looked around and found that the faces of the people around me were expressionless. I tried to look out the window and it was raining. The car was so big that it blurred my vision. I asked the driver loudly, "Where is this bus going?" The driver didn't answer. He didn't seem to feel my presence. I suddenly turned my head to look for the girl. She was no longer there. I looked around again and found that she had sat on the other side of me. "Driver, stop the car!" I yelled, and the car stopped. I jumped out desperately, missed the step, and fell heavily into the puddle. I suddenly lost all feeling and only realized that I was in a trance with the wind. The next day, a car passed by the roadside and spotted me. I woke up and grabbed a person next to me and asked, "Am I still alive?" They looked at me with incomprehensible eyes. Next story. There is a story circulating in a school. There is an old girls' dormitory building that has not been renovated because it is sparsely populated. Ming, third of the rooms are empty. Xiao Ming and Xiao Lan, new students, have just moved in. Late on the first night and for the next few nights they heard miserable cries coming from the corridor. The sounds were so unsettling that they couldn't sleep. They decided to tell the senior students about it. At first, their classmates denied that any such thing had happened. However, under persistent questioning from Xiao Ming and Xiao Lan, they finally revealed that a girl had hanged herself in one of the dorm rooms. Xiao Ming, an atheist, didn't believe the story when she heard it. She declared, "The crying at night must be someone playing tricks. I'm going to expose her tonight." Then she left. The timid little one didn't react yet, but the seniors hadn't finished what they were saying, and only the little one heard what they said next. That night, neither Xiao Ming nor Xiao Lan fell asleep. Just after midnight, the faint sound of crying came again. Xiao Ming said to Xiao Lan, "Let's go look for it." Then he pulled Xiao Lan and walked away to find the source of the sound. Xiao Lan's face was already as pale as paper, and he was led by Xiao Ming stupidly. The corridor of the dormitory late at night was filled with a ghostly atmosphere, and a few small lights flickered on and off, casting their long shadows on the ground. They followed the crying sound to the fourth floor. Almost all the rooms on this floor were closed. The cries sounded more miserable and terrifying here. Now even Xiao Ming was a little scared. They came to a dormitory door where the sound of crying was emanating from. This dormitory had obviously been empty for a long time. The mottled old paint and some cobwebs on the door indicated that no one had taken care of it for many years. At this moment, the horrible crying suddenly stopped, leaving a deathly silence. Xiao Ming calmed down, glanced at the trembling Xiao Lan, and then pushed the door hard, but the door was locked tightly and could not be pushed open at all. Xiao Lan said tremblingly, Let's go back. I'm so scared." Xiao Ming didn't listen at all. She noticed that the door's lock was old-fashioned, with a keyhole as big as a pinky nail, so she turned her eyes to the keyhole and looked in. She only saw a blood-red patch and nothing else. She rubbed her eyes and looked into the hole again. It was still red like blood. She murmured, "Why is it all red?" After hearing this, Xiao Lan suddenly collapsed to the ground and said with trembling blue lips, "Senior sister said that when the girl hung herself, her eyes were stained red with blood. Xiao Lan, her eyes were red." Make sure you like and subscribe to Story Community for everyday story.